The weight of silver. A demon hunter's Neskatha. Silver blade feels heavier tonight than it did 20 years ago when I first picked it up. Not because of its physical weight that remains constant at exactly 3 pounds, 4 ounces. Precise balance Master Aldrich insisted upon, but because of everything it represents. Every demon I've sent back to the void, every innocent life saved, every sleepless night spent tracking creatures that shouldn't exist in a world that pretends. They don't. My name is Marcus Kane, though most who know what I do simply call me Hunter. I've been walking this path for 2 decades now, ever since the night my younger sister disappeared into the shadow realm that exists parallel to our own mundane reality. The authorities called it a missing person case. The newspapers speculated about teenage runaways and predators. Only I knew the truth, that something with yellow eyes and breath, like sulfur, had taken her through a tear in the fabric between worlds. The profession of demon hunting isn't listed in any career guidance manual. There are no universities offering degrees in applied demonology or supernatural combat theory. We learn through mentorship, passed down from one generation to the next like some grim family trade. Except the families we form are bound not by blood but by shared trauma and an unwavering commitment to standing between the darkness and the light. Most people live their entire lives without ever glimpsing the true nature of reality. They walk past the old Victorian house on Elm Street without noticing how the shadows seem to move wrong around its windows. They don't feel the subtle temperature drop when a lesser demon passes nearby, or recognize the metallic taste that floods your mouth when you're in the presence of something ancient and malevolent. This ignorance isn't weakness, it's a mercy. The human mind has remarkable defense mechanisms, designed to filter out information that would drive it mad with terror. But some of us are different. We're born with what the old-timers call the sight. Though it's more than just vision, it's an entire sensory experience that allows us to perceive the supernatural world overlaying our own. Everything appears normal until you learn to shift your perception, and then you see them everywhere: the minor imps that feed on negative emotions in subway stations, the wraiths that congregate around hospitals and funeral homes, the shadow people that slip through cracks in apartment walls. The hierarchy of demonic entities is complex and varied, shaped by millennia of evolution in realms where the laws of physics operate more like suggestions than absolutes. At the bottom are the fetus creatures, barely more intelligent than insects, that sustain themselves on human misery, fear, or despair. They're responsible for most of the inexplicable mood swings people experience in certain locations, the sudden waves of anxiety in crowded places, the feeling of being watched when you're alone. Above them are the manipulators, demons with enough intelligence and power to influence human behavior directly. They're the whispers that convince someone to take a drink when they're trying to stay sober, the impulses that turn minor disagreements into violent confrontations, the voices that make suicide seem like a reasonable solution to temporary problems. These entities understand human psychology with disturbing precision, exploiting our deepest insecurities and desires with surgical accuracy. The third tier consists of the possessor's demons, capable of completely overwhelming a human consciousness and taking control of their body. Popular culture has sensationalized possession to the point where most people expect dramatic head-spinning theatrics, but the reality is far more subtle and terrifying. A possessed person might seem perfectly normal for months or even years, while the demon slowly corrupts their soul from within, using their human disguise to spread influence and recruit followers. At the apex are the ancient beings, so old and powerful that their very presence in our dimension causes reality to warp around them. They appear rarely, usually only when summoned by ambitious cultists, or when the barriers between worlds grow thin during certain astronomical alignments. Fighting an ancient is less like combat and more like standing in the path of a hurricane. While armed with an umbrella, the tools of our trade have evolved over centuries of trial and error. Each weapon and technique refined through the sacrifice of hunters, who discovered what worked by witnessing firsthand what didn't. Silver remains the most reliable material for crafting weapons, not because of any mystical properties, but because it conducts spiritual energy more efficiently than other metals. The purity of the silver matter's industrial-grade alloys lack the resonance necessary to channel the hunter's will into tangible force. My primary weapon is the blade I mentioned earlier, forged by a blacksmith in Prague, who learned his craft from masters who once served the Vatican's secret orders. The steel core provides strength and flexibility, while the silver coating allows it to cut through demonic essence as easily as mortal flesh. The handle is wrapped in leather taken from a grimoire, bound in human skin, a grisly detail that serves a practical purpose, as the material has been saturated with protective wards over centuries of use. Holy water is another staple, though its effectiveness depends entirely on the faith of the person who blessed it. Water consecrated by a priest going through the motions of a ritual he doesn't truly believe in might as well be tap water. But liquid, blessed by someone with genuine, unshakable faith, becomes a weapon that can cause demons physical agony and force them to retreat. I carry 3 vials at all times, blessed by Sister Catherine at the Monastery of Silent Sorrows, a woman whose faith could move mountains if she chose to. Salt creates barriers that most demons cannot cross, though the type of salt matters. Table salt processed in modern facilities lacks the spiritual purity necessary for effective warding. Sea salt collected during specific lunar phases works better. But the most potent barriers require salt that has been touched by genuine suffering, salt from the tears of the bereaved, from the sweat of the dying, from the ocean spray that has witnessed countless tragedies. Iron serves as both weapon and shield, its mere presence causing discomfort to supernatural entities. Cold iron metal, forged without the use of heaties, even more effective, though incredibly difficult to work with using traditional methods. My belt buckle is made from cold iron hammered into shape over the course of 3 months, and the simple touch of it against my skin provides constant protection from minor influences. The training of a demon hunter begins with learning to see past the veils that separate dimensions. This isn't a skill that can be taught through books or lectures. It requires a fundamental shift in perception that many never achieve despite years of effort. The process often begins with meditation techniques designed to quiet the rationale, mind's tendency to filter out impossible information. Hours spent in graveyards at midnight, learning to distinguish between natural shadows and unnatural ones. Days fasting until the barriers between worlds grow thin enough to glimpse what lies beyond. Physical conditioning is equally important, though not in the way most people imagine. Demons don't fight fair, they teleport, phase through solid matter, and manipulate reality itself. Raw strength and speed matter less than flexibility, endurance, and the ability to think clearly under impossible circumstances. A hunter who can't maintain focus while being psychically assaulted by a creature of pure malice won't survive their first real encounter. Mental fortification is perhaps the most crucial aspect of training. Demons attack the mind as readily as the body, exploiting fears, doubts, and traumas with weaponized precision. They'll manifest as deceased loved ones pleading for mercy, create illusions of safety when danger is greatest, or simply fill a hunter's thoughts with whispers of futility and despair. Building defenses against these attacks requires confronting every aspect of yourself you'd rather ignore, every shameful memory, every deep-seated fear, every moment of weakness that could be used against you. The psychological toll of this work cannot be overstated. We operate in a world where every shadow might hide a predator, where the people we're sworn to protect would institutionalize us if they knew what we claimed to see. The isolation is crushing. Try explaining to a dinner date that you spend your nights tracking creatures that consume human souls, and watch how quickly they find excuses to leave. Most hunters develop some form of coping mechanism, though not all of them are healthy. Thomas Blackwood, who mentored me during my early years, turned to alcohol to dull the constant awareness of supernatural threats around him. He died not in glorious battle against some ancient evil, but choking on his own vomit in a studio apartment that reeked of failure and despair. Sarah Mitsuko channeled her trauma into an obsessive need for control, cataloging and categorizing every demonic encounter with scientific precision until she forgot that the creatures she studied had once been capable of feeling fear and pain. My own mechanism involves writing. These chronicles serve multiple purposes. They document encounters for future hunters who might face similar situations. They help me process the horror of what I've witnessed, and they maintain a connection to my humanity in a profession that constantly threatens to strip it away. There's something cathartic about translating chaos into ordered words, about creating meaning from madness. The general public's ignorance about the supernatural world creates numerous complications for active hunters. Police investigations must be carefully managed to avoid awkward questions about why a crime scene shows evidence of extreme heat damage, despite no signs of fire, or why multiple witnesses describe impossible creatures that security cameras somehow failed to record. We've developed relationships with sympathetic officers who understand there are cases best left unsolved, and medical examiners who know when to list cause of death as natural causes, despite evidence suggesting otherwise. Insurance companies present their own challenges. How do you explain that your apartment building's structural damage was caused by something that doesn't officially exist? Most hunters carry multiple policies under different names, cycling through coverage as claims become too frequent or unusual to avoid suspicion. We've learned to document everything with conventional explanations: gas explosions instead of demon fire, animal attacks instead of claw marks that belong to no earthly creature, electrical failures instead of manifestations that drain power. From nearby sources, the internet age has created both opportunities and obstacles for our community. Online forums allow hunters to share information and coordinate responses to major threats, but they also attract attention from law enforcement agencies monitoring for potential terrorists, and from genuine cultists seeking to identify and eliminate those who oppose their activities. We communicate through layers of encryption and coded language, discussing sulfur spikes and cold spots and electromagnetic anomalies in terms that sound like amateur ghost hunting to casual observers. Funding. Our activities requires creativity and compromise. Government agencies that might benefit from our services cannot officially acknowledge our existence, leaving us to finance our own operations through a combination of private donors, inherited wealth, and legitimate careers that provide flexible schedules. Some hunters work as freelance consultants, offering their services to wealthy clients dealing with supernatural problems they can't report to conventional authorities. Others invest in businesses that provide access to necessary materials, occult bookshops, antique dealers specializing in religious artifacts, security companies that can justify purchasing unusual equipment. The physical demands of hunting extend beyond the immediate dangers of confronting supernatural entities. Chronic exposure to two-dimensional rifts causes cellular damage that manifests as premature aging, joint pain, and increased susceptibility to conventional diseases. The silver in our weapons slowly poisons us through skin contact, requiring regular treatments to prevent heavy metal toxicity. The constant stress of hypervigilance wreaks havoc on our nervous systems, leading to insomnia, anxiety disorders, and cardiovascular problems that claim as many hunters as demon claws. Relationships become complicated when your profession requires keeping secrets that could endanger loved ones. I've watched colleagues struggle with marriages that slowly deteriorate under the weight of unexplained absences and mysterious injuries. Children grow up thinking their parent is simply unreliable or uncaring, never knowing that daddy's broken. Promises stem from emergency responses to supernatural crises. Some hunters choose complete isolation to avoid these complications, while others attempt to maintain normal lives through elaborate deceptions that eventually collapse under their own weight. The question of mortality weighs heavily on every hunter's mind. We face creatures that can kill us in ways that leave no trace, teleport our bodies to dimensions where they'll never be found, or trap our souls in eternal torment while our physical forms continue to function as demonic puppets. There are no retirement plans for demon hunters. We fight until we die, and even death doesn't guarantee an end to our service. Some of the most effective hunters I've known are technically deceased, their spirits bound to sacred weapons or protective wards that allow them to continue the battle from beyond the grave. Legacy becomes paramount when you realize that your knowledge and experience might die with you. The old traditions of master-apprentice relationships ensure continuity, but finding suitable candidates grows increasingly difficult in a world where young people are more likely to dismiss supernatural encounters as mental illness than embrace them as a calling. Universities produce graduates trained in scientific methodology who lack the spiritual flexibility necessary to accept that reality operates according to rules they weren't taught in physics class. Training facilities exist in remote locations where new hunters can practice without risking civilian casualties or attracting unwanted attention. The Blackwood Institute, named after my late mentor, occupies a former monastery in the Canadian wilderness where the barriers between dimensions are naturally thin. Students learn to fight in environments saturated with supernatural energy, preparing them for the disorienting effects of demonic presence while building resistance to psychic attacks. The Institute's curriculum covers subjects no conventional school would dare teach. Comparative demonology examines the behavioral patterns and weaknesses of different entity types. Applied theology explores how various religious traditions can be adapted for supernatural combat. Forensic anomaly detection trains hunters to identify supernatural causes behind apparently natural events. Advanced dimensional theory attempts to explain the physics of interdimensional travel, though much of it remains pure speculation based on limited observation. Perhaps the strangest aspect of the hunter's life is how quickly the impossible becomes routine. After years of confronting beings that exist outside normal reality, you develop a professional detachment that allows you to analyze threat levels and tactical options, while a demon wearing your dead mother's face tries to convince you to lower your weapons. The horror never completely fades, but it transforms into something manageable background tension that sharpens reflexes and maintains focus during critical moments. The seasonal nature of demonic activity creates its own rhythms. Activity spikes during certain astronomical events when the barriers between worlds weaken naturally. The new moon brings an increase in shadow-based entities, while solar eclipses can trigger mass manifestations that require coordinated responses from multiple hunters. Halloween isn't just a quaint tradition, it marks the annual peak of supernatural activity when every hunter worth their salt works double shifts to contain the chaos. Urban environments present unique challenges compared to rural hunting grounds. Cities concentrate human emotions and spiritual energy in ways that create perfect breeding conditions for demons. But they also provide more witnesses, security cameras, and official scrutiny that complicate our operations. Abandoned buildings become staging areas for rituals. Subway tunnels serve as highways for creatures that avoid sunlight, and the constant background noise of metropolitan life masks the sounds of supernatural combat. Rural areas offer more freedom to operate but present their own difficulties. Demons have more space to establish territories. Local folklore often contains kernels of truth about ancient threats, and help may be hours away when situations escalate beyond a single hunter's capabilities. Small towns that have harbored supernatural secrets for generations develop their own defense mechanisms, some spoken agreements about areas to avoid, protective rituals disguised as local customs, and residents who ask no questions about strangers who arrive during times of crisis. International cooperation between hunters varies, dramatically based on cultural attitudes toward the supernatural. European hunters benefit from centuries of institutional knowledge preserved in church archives and family traditions. Asian practitioners often integrate hunting techniques with martial arts and spiritual disciplines that Western hunters struggle to comprehend. African hunters work with tribal shamans who maintain connections to spirit worlds that predate recorded history. The political implications of our work extend far beyond simple law enforcement issues. Governments that officially deny the existence of supernatural threats must still respond when demonic activity threatens public safety or national security. Black budget programs fund research into anomalous phenomena while maintaining plausible deniability about their true purpose. Military units with classified missions handle situations too large for individual hunters but too sensitive for conventional forces. Corporate interests have begun recognizing the potential value of supernatural resources. Pharmaceutical companies study demon physiology for insights into human biology. Technology firms reverse engineer artifacts from other dimensions. Energy companies explore ways to harness the power that fuels supernatural manifestations. These commercial ventures often conflict with hunter objectives, creating tensions between protecting humanity and protecting profit margins. The environmental impact of demonic activity remains poorly understood but increasingly concerning. Dimensional rifts leak energy that affects local ecosystems in unpredictable ways. Plants exposed to certain types of supernatural radiation develop properties that blur the line between botany and alchemy. Animals in areas of high supernatural activity sometimes develop enhanced intelligence or supernatural abilities of their own, creating new categories of creatures that don't fit traditional classifications. Climate change may be affecting the frequency and intensity of supernatural events. Rising ocean temperatures correlate with increased activity from aquatic demons, while deforestation in certain regions appears to weaken natural barriers that have contained ancient threats for millennia. Some hunters theorize that environmental destruction is making our dimension more permeable to outside influences, though proving causation remains difficult when dealing with phenomena that operate outside conventional scientific methods. The next generation of hunters faces challenges that my generation never anticipated. Digital surveillance makes covert operations more difficult, while social media creates new vectors for demonic influence and recruitment. Young hunters who grew up online must learn to distinguish between supernatural manipulation and ordinary trolling behavior. The instant availability of information makes research easier, but also spreads misinformation that can prove lethal during actual encounters. Medical advances have improved our survival rates, but also complicated our operations. Modern hospitals monitor patients too closely for hunters to receive treatment, without answering uncomfortable questions about unusual injuries. Emergency rooms maintain databases that flag suspicious patterns of trauma. Insurance companies use algorithms to identify fraudulent claims that catch hunters whose injuries don't match their cover stories. The psychological support available to hunters has improved dramatically since my early years. Professional counselors who specialize in supernatural trauma understand the unique stresses of our profession without requiring detailed explanations that might compromise operational security. Support groups provide safe spaces for hunters to discuss experiences that would be dismissed as delusions in conventional therapy settings. Retirement from active hunting rarely means complete withdrawal from the supernatural world. Veteran hunters often transition to support roles, researchers who analyze demonic behavior patterns, craftspeople who create and maintain specialized equipment, teachers who pass on hard-won knowledge to new generations. The skills we develop don't transfer well to conventional careers, but they create value within the hunter community that ensures we remain useful even when our reflexes slow and our bodies fail. The question of what lies beyond this life haunts every hunter who has seen enough death to understand that consciousness doesn't simply end when the body stops functioning. Some demons are clearly the remnants of human souls corrupted by their time in hostile dimensions. Others appear to be native to realms that operate according to entirely different principles. The existence of these entities raises uncomfortable questions about the nature of existence itself and what awaits those who spend their lives fighting creatures that may have once been human. Family histories within the hunter community often span generations, creating dynasties bound by shared purpose rather than simple bloodlines. The Ashford family has produced hunters for over 3 centuries. Their accumulated knowledge preserved in journals that read like a chronicle of humanity's secret war against the darkness. The Yamamoto clan combines traditional Japanese martial arts with modern hunting techniques, creating hybrid fighting styles that confuse demons accustomed to Western approaches. Technological integration in hunting operations has accelerated rapidly in recent years. Electromagnetic field detectors identify supernatural presences with increasing accuracy. Thermal imaging cameras reveal energy signatures invisible to normal vision. Communication devices designed for military use allow hunters to maintain contact across dimensional barriers that disrupt conventional signals. However, our reliance on technology creates vulnerabilities when facing entities capable of manipulating electronic systems. The economic impact of supernatural activity on local communities often goes unrecognized. Property values in areas of high demonic activity tend to decline as sensitive individuals subconsciously avoid the locations. Business districts affected by supernatural influences experience higher turnover rates, increased vandalism, and patterns of customer behavior that suggest underlying psychological effects. Insurance claims in supernatural hotspots spike during peak activity periods. Though the correlation remains officially unacknowledged, training in multiple combat disciplines has become essential as demons adapt to our traditional methods. Classical sword techniques work well against entities that fight with claws and teeth. But modern demons increasingly utilize abilities that require firearms training, explosive disposal techniques, and even vehicle combat skills. Urban warfare principles apply when pursuing targets through dense civilian populations. Close-quarters combat becomes critical when hunting in confined spaces where traditional weapons prove impractical. The philosophical implications of our work extend beyond simple questions of good versus evil. If demons are capable of growth and change, as some evidence suggests, do we have the right to destroy them simply for existing? Are we protecting humanity from genuine threats or perpetuating a cycle of violence based on fear and misunderstanding? These questions lack clear answers, but they weigh heavily on hunters who must make life and death decisions in seconds, without time for careful moral analysis. Research into dimensional physics has revealed that our reality may be far more fragile than previously understood. The barriers between worlds aren't fixed walls, but dynamic membranes that respond to consciousness, emotion, and will. Human activities, from individual thoughts to collective behaviors, influence the permeability of these barriers in ways we're only beginning to comprehend. This knowledge carries the terrifying implication that humanity itself may be partially responsible for the supernatural threats we face. The preservation of hunter knowledge has become increasingly digital, creating new challenges for maintaining security while ensuring accessibility. Encrypted databases store centuries of accumulated wisdom, but digital systems remain vulnerable to supernatural influences that can corrupt data or reveal sensitive information to hostile entities. Physical archives require protection from both conventional theft and supernatural destruction, while copies distributed for redundancy increase the risk of information falling into wrong hands. Legal frameworks for dealing with supernatural crimes remain non-existent in most jurisdictions. How do you prosecute someone for summoning demons when courts don't acknowledge that demons exist? What sentence fits the crime of opening a gateway to another dimension? These cases typically get buried in bureaucratic complications or dismissed as mental health issues, leaving victims without justice and perpetrators free to repeat their crimes. The recruitment of new hunters has evolved from the traditional apprenticeship model to include specialized programs that identify and train individuals with supernatural sensitivity. Psychological evaluations help distinguish between genuine psychic abilities and mental illness. Physical assessments determine who possesses the reflexes and endurance necessary for combat. Spiritual testing reveals whether candidates have the moral fortitude to use deadly force against entities that may once have been human. International incidents involving supernatural threats require delicate diplomatic handling. When a demon outbreak in one country threatens neighboring nations, hunter organizations must coordinate responses across political boundaries while maintaining the secrecy that prevents mass panic. These operations often involve unofficial cooperation between governments that publicly deny any knowledge of supernatural activities. The study of demonology has revealed that evil isn't a simple binary concept, but a spectrum of corruption that affects different entities in different ways. Some demons retain enough humanity to experience regret and seek redemption, while others have become so twisted that they exist only to cause suffering. This complexity complicates ethical decision-making during encounters and has led to the development of protocols for determining when mercy is appropriate versus when destruction is the only option. Weather patterns in areas of high supernatural activity often display anomalies that puzzle meteorologists but make perfect sense to experienced hunters. Sudden temperature drops frequently precede major manifestations. Electrical storms may be triggered by dimensional rifts rather than atmospheric conditions. Fog and mist sometimes indicate the presence of entities that exist partially in our dimension and partially in others. The health effects of prolonged exposure to supernatural energy continue to be studied by researchers who must work within the constraints of official secrecy. Hunters frequently develop enhanced sensory abilities that persist even when not actively engaged in supernatural activities. Some experience prophetic dreams or spontaneous visions of future events. Others develop resistance to conventional diseases but increased sensitivity to environmental changes that signal supernatural activity. Long-term survival in the hunting profession requires constant adaptation to evolving threats and changing circumstances. Demons learn from their encounters with humans, developing new tactics and abilities that render previous strategies obsolete. Hunters must stay ahead of these developments through continuous training, research, and information sharing with colleagues who may have encountered similar evolutionary adaptations in their own regions. The isolation inherent in hunter work creates its own psychological challenges beyond the obvious dangers. Maintaining a public persona that masks your true profession requires constant vigilance and creative explanation for injuries, absences, and behavior patterns that don't match your supposed occupation. The stress of living a double life contributes to the high rates of anxiety and depression within the hunter community. As I write these words in the early hours of morning, listening to the city wake up around me, I'm struck by the strange duality of our existence. The same sunrise that brings comfort to ordinary people marks the end of another night spent standing guard against horrors they can't imagine. The same streets that host their daily routines serve as battlegrounds where the fate of their souls may be decided without their knowledge. The silver blade beside me will grow heavy again before this day ends. There are reports of unusual activity in the warehouse district, and the phase of the moon suggests tonight will bring fresh challenges. But that's tomorrow's burden. For now, I'll rest in the knowledge that another night has passed without the darkness claiming any new victims. At least not on my watch. This is the life I chose when I picked up that blade 20 years ago. It's a life of constant vigilance, perpetual danger, and necessary sacrifice. It's also a life of purpose, meaning, and the quiet satisfaction that comes from standing between the innocent and the evil that would consume them. The weight of silver is heavy, but it's a weight I carry willingly, knowing that every demon I send back to the void is one less threat to the world my sister never got to see grow old. The hunt continues, as it always has and always will, until the last hunter falls, or the last demon retreats into whatever darkness spawned them. Until then, we few who can see clearly will keep our vigil, armed with ancient wisdom and modern weapons, fighting a war that history will never record for people who will never know we existed. The silver blade grows heavier, but it never grows too heavy to lift.